Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Articulate Thoughts, a personal video blog of my experiences and analysis and just overall commentary of conscious dance, which is a practice that uses dance as a form of moving meditation. And today's topic will be ego death. And this is a very interesting thing that I've been experiencing more and more on a conscious dance environment. But it is something that I've experienced before, maybe 6 or 7 times throughout my entire life. But for the first 3 or 4, I wasn't really aware of what that experience was. I was just really confused. I'm like, okay, let's just put that on the shelf and move on, and maybe that will be figured out at some point. So, if you've never heard of what ego death is, it's basically an experience where you kind of an individual step outside of their personality, or like take off their filters and just observe something purely as an observer without any bias or story attached to what's being experienced or observed. And ego is kind of like a term that's kind of a little wish-washy, so I will give my perspective on it just to give a context of what I'm coming from. So for me, the ego is basically a personality that an individual has, and it's like a collection of, memories, feelings, opinions, and it's basically just a filter in which the perceiver takes in the information and kind of forms their own understanding of what's happening. And when ego death is experienced, like none of that exists. It's just an experience, an observation, and that's all that it is. And it's a pretty subtle difference, because I feel like with ego death, there's no like emotional attachment to an outcome, or it's just something's happening and just cool, that's what's happening, and very little reaction. So when I first experienced ego death, or became more familiar with it, I thought it was just something that occurred in psychedelic experiences when taking some kind of like hallucinogen or something of the sorts. So the first few times I was under psilocybin mushrooms or LSD. And I just want to quickly share like the first time I ever experienced it, just to give an idea of like what that kind of psychedelic experience was like. So I took salvia, and I was sitting in my room, and I was looking around in my bedroom. I'm like, okay, that's a Bob Marley poster, that's a bookshelf, that's a sweater. But I was observing all these things, and I still had my short-term memory, and if my motor skills were all intact. Obviously, I felt like all kind of woozy and high, but I was still conscious enough to be aware of what I was observing and experiencing. But I was looking at all these things, but I had no memory, I had no attachment. So I looked at a Bob Marley poster, but I knew the name and I knew the face, but I didn't know who he was, or I didn't know any of his music. I didn't know he was a musician, or he was just some dude on a poster. And I'd be looking at a bookshelf, like, okay, that holds books. Books are things that are be read, but I didn't recognize any of the books that were on it as anything I read. I had no personal attachment or personal memories or anything to identify with myself and what I'm observing. It was just like a purely observation. So, and then there was like a weird sense of confusion. It's like, how come I could recognize that, but there's like a wall or a barrier. It's like I can't go further than I want to understand what I'm observing, but it's just like there's this block. And that's because it's just the observer that's present, and there's no ego to put anything into context. So that was like my psychedelic experience, but I've been noticing more, or I've been experiencing on the dance floor when I do conscious dance sometimes. When I'm in a very intense wave and I'm really into the dance, I actually do experience ego death as well, but it's in a much more subtle level, and it's just a submission or a surrender to the present moment. And there's just the music and how I feel in my body, and I'm observing the feeling, and that's it. There's no story, there's no there's an emotional reaction, but it's not a story that's being made. It's just like listening to music and having it move through me. And it's just a very interesting observation to be like in a place where everything's experiencing in it. There's no good or bad, or there's no like context. It's just an experience, and it's just a very liberating and like a sense of freedom that I've never really felt before. or I'm experiencing like in a new way through this form of ego death in the conscious dance experience. So that's my take on those whole things, and like I think it'd be a very interesting thing to pursue more and more. I was talking to my roommate who recently went on a 10-day Vipassana retreat. So that's a meditation retreat where the participants don't talk for 10 days and they just meditate. I think they do talk with their teachers a little bit, but for the most part, they're just meditating and they're not conversing with each other or anything like that. So, and she experienced a lot of things that kind of sounded a lot like ego death. Like it's just like there's no judgment or opinion or story attached to what's going on. It's just a simple observation of, okay, these are sensations in my body. This is what it feels like, but there's no story attachment or judgment on it. So I think that kind of influenced me to take that mindset onto the dance floor and then realize, oh, that is an ego death experience. It's just an observation. So yeah, so if you have any questions or want to share some experiences along those lines, you know where to find me, how to reach me. This week is pretty exciting for dance, actually. There is the 5 Rhythms dance class happening tonight at the Central United Church at 7 p.m., which is always a really good experience for me. And, well, I guess any conscious dance, but just like 5 Rhythms is very close to my heart. And Friday, I'll be at the Yoga Passage dancing at the Ecstatic dance, and I'll be posting up a couple other dances that'll be available that other facilitators are offering this week. And if you have any questions or need some recommendations, I would be happy to help you out. So stay cool, and I'll see you on the dance floor, inshallah.